listening to Xposed Living, Be Ageless, the podcast where we drop the masks, flip the script, and talk real life, real love, and real leadership unfiltered. I'm Stacey Van Thune, coach, speaker, entrepreneur, and founder of the Xposed Living movement that's redefining what it means to live, lead, and grow at any age. We talk identity, reinvention, belief, and freedom from the bedroom to the boardroom. Yes, we go there. This is not about staying young. This is about waking up. So if you're done with the shoulds and craving more fun, more freedom, more truth, more you, then grab your favorite drink, your bestie, maybe your journal. It's time. Let's get exposed. Welcome back, friends, to another episode of Xposed Living. Today, we're joined by someone whose work centers around a powerful word, catalyst. My guest today is Trudi du Toit, a leadership facilitator, speaker, and team development specialist based in South Africa. For nearly 4 decades, Trudi has worked with leaders, managers, and teams across industries, helping them strengthen how they lead people, not just how they manage people. She is known as the catalyst because of her ability to create alignment within teams and help leaders step into their roles with greater courage, integrity, and self-awareness. Her work focuses on empowering supervisors and managers to build culture where people actually want to show up, contribute, and grow. So you know this woman's work is deeply close to my heart. And today we're going to talk about leadership, alignment, people management, and what it really takes to build teams that thrive. So Trudi, welcome to Xposed Living.
Thank you, Stacey. This is awesome.
It is awesome. Trudi and I have been talking for probably a little bit over a half an hour before we even pressed record. I'm telling you, I have a feeling that we'll have to have her back because we haven't even scratched the surface of what we're going to talk about. But this woman is a delightful, experienced woman with 2 daughters. So we could go into that next time too, as I was already asking her for some leadership and advice as a parent. But Trudi, today I just want to dive in with, you've spent decades working with leaders and teams across different industries. And I'm curious, after all these years observing leadership up close, what's the biggest mistake leaders consistently make when it comes to leading their people?
Well, I think it starts even before that. The biggest mistake that happens is that people get promoted from, like, for example, a position where they're not necessarily working with people. They could be artisans, and they could be really good artisans. And then they get promoted into a leadership position or to a position of manager or supervisor. And because they were good artisans, it's assumed that, of course, they'll be good managers, but it's a totally different skill set. So the biggest problem that then occurs is dealing with people. That's a totally, totally different skill set, and you need to be trained for it. So you can't just take someone, yank them out of an artisan position, stick them into supervisory or management position and think they are going to make it, because most of them don't. And unfortunately, the consequence of failure when you have a whole bunch of people reporting to you is so much bigger.
Yeah.
It has huge implications for the organization, and not to mention the individual, of course.
You know, when you're talking about that, I used to be in banking and I'd see this all the time, that someone would be a really good financial advisor or helping people one-on-one. And it was almost the natural progression to move ahead that you'd want to get into some type of leadership position. So then they would move into assistant branch manager or management and really be struggling because, to your point, it was 2 different skill sets. And what made them really great in one wasn't necessarily going to make them great in this one. So they really found themselves even doubting their own ability.
And along with their own doubt and uncertainty comes high stress level.
Yeah.
It's the stats are actually frightening. They say that I think it's Gallup that says that 60% of managers fail within the first 2 years in the job. And of course, those that remain behind, the 40%, it's not necessarily guaranteed that they're successful. It's not implied. The fact that they're still there means that they're in a position where they can do an awful lot of damage, not just to other people and to the organization, but to themselves and their own careers. They don't plan to fail. And they don't fail because they're bad people.
Right.
They fail because they don't know how. That's the crux of the matter. So that is key. Whenever I deal with teams, I ask them, what kind of preparation did you have for this role? What are the key issues that you're dealing with? And it's frightening to see how few of them actually had any kind of management or leadership training and development. And even that we can discuss, because you get training and you get training. A lot of the training interventions are, I don't know, you need something very practical. You need something that is streamlined and tailored towards certain individuals' needs.
When did your love for leadership start? Share a little bit about your leadership journey.
Well, I was actually quite a clueless kid. Here's what people don't know about me. I grew up on a farm, Stacey. I rode horses, and I drove tractors long before I could drive an ordinary vehicle. I milked cows. I made fire breaks and fought runaway fires, and I helped bring lambs and calves into the world, and I planted and harvested crops. And I mean, what do you know about leadership when you're doing things like that? It's so earthy, but I kind of needed that. It grounded me. My dad was a military man before his retirement, a World War II veteran, an officer in the Defense Force, and a no-nonsense person. He used to look at you, and you knew that this was the time to put a cork in it pretty quickly.
You stood up a little bit straighter.
Yeah, indeed. But he taught me a lot. I learned the value of hard work, of finishing the job. And that is pretty foundational when you think of leadership. But it goes so much deeper than that. I think if there's one lesson I learned, it's honesty and integrity. And in so many ways, when we take on a job that we're not equipped to do, it impacts our integrity, it impacts our credibility, it impacts us in our core. So I went to university. It was not funded by anybody. I had a bursary. And then I had to go and work to pay it all off. So I taught for 7 long years. It was real blood money. And when I left education, I got a job in the corporate. And the very first manager I had was a dream. I didn't realize at that point in time, but she actually became a role model for me and an inspiration for what I do today. I was with that company for 7 years. She equipped me. I eventually took over her position, which I held for 4 years. And then I got really bored and started messing around and moved companies. And yeah, I think we do that. Yeah. Was it a good idea? Wasn't it a good idea? It was what it was. I needed it for growth. But that's where I learned that not all managers are good managers, because the rest of them, most of them were pretty rotten, actually, downright destructive, and pretty clueless when it came to dealing with people. And now I'd been in that position where I'd had this awesome manager. I took over from her. She was a role model to me. I ran the team. We did extremely well in that time. I had a team of 13 women reporting to me at one point in time. And it was tough. It gave a whole new meaning to the term baptism by fire. But we made it work. And I think that's where I figured out so many different ways to deal with people, and where I realized that if you're not connecting with them and finding out what's happening with them and taking a personal interest, you have zero influence, nothing. They are not going to cooperate with you. They're going to stick around, fly beneath the radar, just to keep out of trouble. If you really want performance out of people, it means connecting with them. So I had to grow emotional intelligence, empathy, self-awareness, being open to criticism and welcome sessions where I would sit one-on-one with them and say, how are you? How are you with me? What am I doing that's working for you, and what am I doing that's not working for you? And getting them to level with me and get to an honesty that broke through so many barriers. And I think that was the foundation for me. Now, that would not have happened if I wasn't in that position. And then, of course, from there, moved into other positions where I reported to people where I looked at them and thought, but this is all wrong. This is not how it's meant to be. This is really cockeyed. How can you work with people like this? And I saw the impact on productivity. And so I worked in different teams throughout corporate until I met my husband. I didn't know at that point in time. He was a facilitator, and he ran a course for the company that I was working for. And then he persuaded me to come on a presentation skills course. And at the end of the 2 days, he looked me up and down a few times and he said, I think you should come and work for me. Upon which I gave him the once or twice up and down as well. He's been for me. And well, it's too late now because we've been married 25 years and we've been together well over 26. It was a long time ago, but he also pretty much shaped my thinking. And I appreciated his style in connecting with people. And again, that theme of connection comes up again and again. And I grew to realize that if there's no emotional connection, your company is not going to be sustainable. You have wonderful, lofty goals and grand ideals, but it's not about systems. It's not about all these fantastic things. It's about connecting with people, because when you show that you care about people and you take care of people, they care about your business.
So good.
It formed the foundation.
100%. Well, and so like, what is that bridge then to help people moving into leadership to get that success that they're looking for? What are some key skill sets? I mean, you talked about connection. Can you teach somebody how to connect with people?
You can. You absolutely can. I think a lot of the processes I run start off with a diagnostic process. It starts with the conversation, like you did tonight with me. You connected with me. You took time to get to know me. You asked me questions about myself. And I felt heard. I felt understood. I felt valued. And when people feel those things, they function differently. They think differently. They behave differently because there's psychological safety. That's what you create. So when you teach a prospective manager, supervisor, or somebody who's been in the job a while, where they realize, this is not as easy as I thought it was going to be. What am I doing wrong? When you demonstrate this kind of way of connecting, you bridge that gap. You show them how. And very often they go back to their teams. They try different things. And by that time, of course, the team is often quite fed up. They looking at this person, they become predictable. So that you have to change the rules of engagement. And when you surprise them, you catch them off guard. It's a bit like our kids. If you think our children, they're pretty smart. They read us. They know who we are and what we're about. And it's as if from a very little age, they walk around with a remote control. Whose buttons can I push today? Dads, the carers, the cat, the dog, all of the above, because we've become predictable. So the minute you change your behavior and your approach to them and you start connecting differently, you change the rules of engagement and they start thinking differently, behaving differently. They look at you and they say, are you feeling okay today? Because they're not accustomed to that sort of thing. So yes, it can be taught.
can be taught. I love that. I love how much you put into connecting with people, because I too am under the same philosophy of thought that we spend so much time focusing on the strategy and the information. And although whether it's Prasa or AdCard, different change management, they all have that people element. People
Yeah.
so much so go back to implementing the strategy, and then we'll bring the people versus allowing them to lead first. So if you're supporting a leader or a company and they are trying to implement a new piece of change, how would you help them, or what would you tell them to be able to focus more on that connection? Or what does that look like in practical sense? Because I think the challenge is sometimes they can't measure connection.
Yeah, quite right.
Right. And so how do you help them to realize and or to prioritize that people part, especially when trying to improve their culture and or to make a change in it?
So some of the very simple processes that I run, I'm giving away my
Yeah,
trade secrets here, is I
I
have
know. It's
them
amazing.
identify. I put them into groups because it's much safer when you're in a group with people that you know and the boss isn't there. If the boss is there, there's a dampener on the whole thing. So the boss must disappear. I send him off somewhere else or send her off somewhere else. And in their groups, they identify what's working and what's not working. Simple exercise. And then it's simply a question of, right, so you tell me, how do you fix this now? You see, you can't give somebody else answers to their problems. All you can do is guide them to find the answers by asking the right questions. And that's why you need to tune in and listen and connect, because when you're connecting, you're able to identify where the pain points are. And then the questions come from there. So it's all a process of engagement. But if that psychological safety isn't there, it's not going to happen.
You know what? You just gave me a mic drop quote. I loved how you said you can't give someone else's their answer to their own problem. And there's so many leaders out there that have this misconception that it's my job to fix things.
And that they feel that they ought to have all the answers.
Right. And if I don't, then where is my value in this? Right.
Yes,
And hence the cycle of micromanaging.
that's where the control comes in. And that comes from fear.
Yeah.
Comes from fear. And fear comes from feeling insecure and uncertain. Whereas understanding that you don't have to have all the answers, that's why you've got a team. And if you present them with the problem and ask questions, so where to from here? And I think that's something that I learned when I took over the original team when I joined corporate. And that model manager of mine, it was such a dream. She was an absolute sweetheart. And not a softie by any means. She was
Right.
pretty firm. You knew where you stood with her. There was no nonsense. But I just appreciated the connection and the care and the empathy. And it's okay, now how are we going to fix this? And I learned that approach from her. And that's exactly, as a manager and as a leader, well, people tend to confuse those two terms, don't they?
Yeah.
Because a
Do you
manager
want
is
to go
not
into them?
necessarily a leader, and a leader is not necessarily a manager, but the two combined is pretty potent. That's what you want. So if you had to, as a manager, shift into a leadership framework in your mind, how would you deal with things differently? Well, you would present them with the problem. Here it is. This is what we're supposed to do. Any ideas on how we're going to get there? And let the team come up with the solutions. Let them tell you how and what, and then you brainstorm ideas from there. Because when they own it, well, then they own it. It's theirs. But if you're going to tell them that's your solution, why should they achieve your goals? The same with budgets and things like that. I used to look at a budget and think, how on earth are we going to achieve this? And I realized I couldn't give each person their budget. So I'd give them a printout of their performance I had a sales team, 13 women. Here's what you did this past year, on all the different product lines that we've done. So we have a big fat budget to achieve. Tell me, how can you increase these numbers so that we achieve this budget? I was surprised every time, because without exception, most of them came up with higher figures and higher numbers and higher than I could ever have given them.
Right.
And they hit them because they owned them. You see, people support what they help to create.
Yeah.
And when you help them by asking the right questions and you're there to support them, you've turned the hierarchical structure on its head, where you are more in a supportive role, but the real people who understand the problem better and have the answers are the ones that are actually doing the work, and you're just guiding them and with a loose rein. So that's essentially it in a nutshell.
It was a great explanation. I loved it so much because I think, like I said, when people understand where their work fits into the bigger picture of whatever's being achieved, then they can take pride in that, and then they value. And it's not about being told things, but then, and you're able to encourage them along the way and see what we've done. I think one thing I've noticed in some leaders is, same as in parenting, we've seen this because I'm guilty of it in parenting, is focusing on what's missing.
Yeah.
And then the team or even my child will tell me, like, you only see what's wrong. You don't see all the good that I do. And it's so interesting that we can get locked into a certain perspective. And it really is about asking ourselves those questions that help us to come kind of out of where we are and help to reframe it in a different way.
And of course, you just hit a key point there. Acknowledgement. Acknowledging when they get it right, and when they don't, it's okay. How are we fixing it? How can I help you? What do you think we need here? Who can we call in? The big thing is that I think a lot of managers like to take the credit for the things that their teams do, which you do, of course, as a manager. But it's so important to raise the profile of the people who are really doing the work, who are solving the problems, who are performing well, because it creates more of the good stuff. If that's what you want them to do, raise them up, acknowledge them, and raise their profiles. People in the company, senior managers, need to know who they are. And I think that's where a lot of succession goes wrong. I see a lot of senior managers wanting to go out in a blaze of glory, but it doesn't happen because they leave an absolute trail of chaos behind them. They fail to recognize the next generation of leaders and equip them for what's to come. So it becomes really, really messy because we're still not acknowledging people for what they're good at. We're not raising their profile. We're not developing them. I'm seeing in many instances where people had different personality profiles, different behavior styles, different habit profiles in a particular team. The manager might be a particularly driven individual and very analytical, task-orientated person, whereas this individual might be people-orientated, relationship-orientated. Now, they're wired so differently. Inherently, there's conflict there. So what is it that you focus on? Do you focus on the differences, or do you focus on where these people are strong and utilize them in the areas of their strengths? You see, in a team where you get, and that's what we do as managers, we tend to appoint people who are similar to us, just a little bit less maybe painful, easier to get along with that individual. But what you really need is a mixture of skills and aptitudes. But it's difficult to manage that. So managers work those people out. They work them out. It's disgraceful.
It's interesting because in Xposed Living, I love to break beliefs that we've grown up. And I don't think that we realize that some of these beliefs that are subconsciously running impact how we show up as a leader.
Self-awareness. It's one of the absolute biggest foundations of emotional intelligence. And without
Thank you.
emotional intelligence, how do you connect? How do you show empathy? How do you get results with people? It is fundamental to any job where you're working with people. If you
Yeah.
look at the difference between someone who's an artisan who works with machines and equipment and systems, for example, they don't argue back. Now, working with people, they have opinions, they have feelings that get hurt, and and they don't always agree. They push back sometimes. And that's why that self-awareness is what's happening inside me when someone's pushing back. How am I going to deal with this optimally?
Yeah.
How do I bring out the best in that individual? Does that person feel safe to speak up? Because if I'm not connecting with them emotionally, they're not going to feel that they can trust me. And trust is key.
Trudy, you're known as the catalyst. I'm curious what that word means to you.
Catalyst is the thing that triggers other things. So if you have a whole string of dominoes and you knock the first one over, that is the catalyst in a whole chain of events.
So I'm curious then with that, what shifts inside a team when a true catalyst enters the room, or in your experience, like, or if a team isn't moving, how do you even like ignite a catalyst? Maybe is a better question to ask.
It is going back to what's working and what's not working. How do we build on what is working and how do we change what's not working? And for them to identify that, for them, the only thing I can do is be a catalyst by asking the right questions and getting them to think differently and getting them to behave differently. I often ask them, what do your teams actually think of you? And a lot of them don't know, and a lot of them look at you like, well, I'm not here to be liked, I'm here to get a job done. Okay, yeah, that's, you're here to get a job done. How are you doing that job? How's it working for you so far? So it's all being a catalyst by asking those questions and getting them to be honest and getting them to open up and to have that trust to actually be prepared to look at themselves differently, because that self-awareness that you're creating is the foundation of the changes that they're going to make in the way that they deal with their teams. And very often I send them off to go and do surveys with their teams, anonymous surveys. And then they have to process that information. And they have to come back and talk to us about what they've discovered about themselves and how their people feel about them. And it's shock and horror. And I thought I was okay. But my people don't like me. They don't want to work for me. Well, one person said he's actually looking for another job. And another one has just said, I can't answer questions. I just work here. So there's disengagement. And when there's this awareness, that leads to a whole lot of other changes, because we look at, okay, so how do we shift this? How do we change this? And working with teams like that over a period of time, it does take time. This is not an instant quick fix thing. This is deep work where people are willing to do some soul searching, or who are willing to be honest with themselves. But they come back after a while with different results.
Yeah.
I'm now achieving my target for the first time in I don't know how long. And it's because I've taken my foot off the gas. It's because my team feel like I trust them. I'm not breathing down their necks anymore. The micromanagement has stopped. And I actually had a conversation with somebody in my team, and I learned all sorts of things about them I didn't know before. So you can see things starting to change, to loosen up. You see it in the numbers, you see it in the productivity and in the relationships. There's a shift. And that is why I enjoy working with teams over a bit of a period of time, I know a client needs to be one who actually commits to a process. There are no quick fixes in this area.
We live in this world of instant gratification, and we did not create these behaviors overnight. They're not going to be fixed overnight. And that it's whether it's leveling up your ability to lead better through self-awareness, or to take that same level of self-awareness and improve your health, your relationships. It is something that we have to be so intentional with.
Yes.
And what my experience has been is that we start getting some wins. So we start drinking our own Kool-Aid and we're like, I'm good. But if we're not still intentional with that, it can so easily go back to where it was.
I think one of the biggest breakthroughs I had very early on, and that was when I met my husband. He actually showed me a tool to read people, an instrument. And it's very, very simple. And I looked at that and I thought, wow, I wish I knew about this earlier on. This could have made such a difference in my life. And I often use that as a point of departure when I work with teams. I show them how to read personality styles and how you work with different styles. Each one is different. You relate to them differently. So when you now suddenly realize, I'm actually task-orientated, I'm not people-orientated, you now need to make allowances. You need to make adjustments, but it enables you to be a bit more flexible when you're dealing with somebody who's wired differently to you.
Right.
And we're all unique. We're all very, very different. And it's a lesson that I learned from my daughter, who was diagnosed with ADHD. And when you're dealing with somebody who is not neurotypical and you're neurotypical, you have to stop. Okay, talk to me. How are we going to connect differently? How are we going to navigate our way through this relationship? Because this is what's important to you, but it's not important to me. So how do we mix and match so this situation, this relationship works out?
So good. Trudi, if people are looking for more leadership support or curious to dive deeper into this with you, how do they get a hold of you?
They can contact me on my website. It is leadwithcatalyst.co.za. They can also contact me on LinkedIn. It's Trudi du Toit, just straight like that. Or they can pop me an email at trudy@leadwithcatalyst.co.za.
Beautiful. I'm going to make sure that all of that information's in the show notes. So if you didn't catch it, just look at the show notes. You'll be able to find where Trudi is. And Trudi, when we end some of these episodes, we kind of end with these rapid fire, exposed, ageless questions. You ready for some?
I hope so.
Yeah, you are. She's like, damn, I'm in the seat now. All right. Getting to know Trudi a little deeper way. Trudi, coffee or tea?
Tea.
Early morning or late night thinker?
Early morning.
What's one leadership book that shaped you?
Leadership and Self-Deception by the Arbinger Institute.
Hey,
good one.
I get the best book recommendation. What's one leadership trait every leader must develop?
Self-awareness.
If someone feels they are self-awareness, I'm going off script here, what is one thing that they could do to improve?
Be open to your own blind spots and ask for feedback from people.
Good. What's something teams need more of today?
Collaboration, understanding.
And on the flip side of that, what would be something organizations need less of?
Ego.
Yes, that ego. I think that's it. I think too, when we were talking about people progress, a lot of people go into leadership because it pays more money. But if you don't love people, there is other ways to earn money. So
absolutely.
What energizes you the most about your work?
Seeing the difference in teams and individuals, watching them grow.
I love it. And what's one word your team would use to describe you?
Probably motivational and driven.
Good. Trudi, we haven't known each other for a long time, but your calmness and your groundedness is something I very much appreciate. So thank you for bringing that today. And my last question, What does living exposed mean to you at this stage in your life?
Authentic.
Can I dive a little bit more into authentic? What is authentic living? Or how does you know that someone's being authentic?
When they are okay with themselves, warts and all.
Yeah.
That also has an element of vulnerability. And when you're too afraid to be vulnerable, I think you find it difficult to be authentic.
Thank you for sharing that. I really love that. I think we're talking again around beliefs that so many of us Gen X, we were taught to be strong and independent and to carry on and not to be weak or ask for help. And I remember thinking at one point in time that vulnerability was almost like a weakness. But over my years, it's changed of like, I can't be courageous. I can't be strong without recognizing that piece of like vulnerability in there. And I think that's really, to come full circle in our conversations where you get that true connection is when you're able to be like, I don't know, but we can figure this out together.
Yeah. Just being real.
Just being real. Any final thoughts to end on, Trudi, when it comes to leadership and any advice for leaders out there, or somebody maybe new going into leaders or looking to expand their team? What's a piece of advice for them?
One piece of advice I would honestly recommend if you're about to be promoted into a management, supervisory, or any kind of leadership position, and you can be a leader without having to work with people. There are areas that you can excel in without the people side. I think those are the easier ones. But do not move into something unless you're equipped for it. Get the training. Learn as much as you can about it and continue to learn. We never get to a place where we know it all. And I've just found that often I had repeat lessons that came up just in different ways with different people until I had to stop and ask myself, what is the lesson the universe is trying to teach me here? And learn it. And inevitably, I'd no sooner learn it and then the next challenge would come up. So that is life. It actually sends us down a path where you learn, you bounce from lesson to lesson, and it makes you who and what you are ultimately. And I believe that we're all there to help one another. We're all interconnected in one way or another.
So good. The true masters always see themselves as beginners. Thank you, Trudi, for sharing your perspective today. I so appreciate everything that you brought in. I know there's so many nuggets in this episode and this conversation for people into leadership, new to leadership, hiring for leadership. And I love how you say, people succeed because the people. And the leaders who create environments where people feel seen, feel valued, feel aligned are the ones who build teams that truly survive and thrive. So to everyone listening, if you lead people, remember that leadership isn't just about performance. It's about the human beings behind the work. It's connection. Until next time, this is Xposed Living. Be bold, be brave, be ageless. And I'm Stacey Manthum. Thank you, Trudi, for joining today.
That's it for today's episode of Xposed Living, Be Ageless. But this is just the beginning. If this episode made you feel something, share it. Tag me. Send it to a friend. Let's start the conversation we can be having all along. No shame, no guilt. Unfiltered, raw, real, exposed. And if you're ready to go deeper, join us inside the Xposed Living Facebook community, where we take this work off the podcast and into real life. Know this, your change starts when your excuses die. Because this life, this one wild, ageless, unforgettable life is waiting on you. This is your time. This is your truth. This is Xposed Living.